A tractor clearing brush in Ventura County, California, struck a rock on Monday morning, and in that single instant the clock started ticking on a disaster that now has 44,000 people under evacuation orders. The Sandy Fire has burned 1,700 acres in less than 48 hours. And on Tuesday morning, the leading edge of those flames came within a quarter-mile of the Santa Susana Field Laboratory, the site of the first commercial power core meltdown in human history. In July of 1959, Boeing, the current owner, evacuated all non-fire personnel from the property. Cal Fire deployed 869 firefighters. The National Weather Service flagged the entire region with red flag fire weather warnings. The Simi Valley Unified School District canceled school for May 20th across every campus. And the same combination of dry chaparral, low humidity, and northeast Santa Ana wind that has driven every catastrophic Southern California wildfire of the last decade was running through the canyons above 44,000 evacuated homes. But here is the detail that changes everything. The detail that turns this from a fast-moving brush fire into something far more unsettling. The Santa Susana Field Laboratory is not just any vacant industrial site. It is 2,850 acres of contaminated land in the hills above Simi Valley. It is the location of approximately 30,000 rocket engine tests between 1948 and 2006. It is the site of a partial reactor meltdown that occurred in July of 1959, 8 months before any of the 3 Mile Island engineers were born. And in 2018, the Woolsey fire started directly on that site. A State of California Department of Toxic Substances Control report later confirmed that the fire could and did spread site contaminants. As of this week, the cleanup the state of California has been demanding for almost 20 years is finally scheduled to begin. And right now, a brush fire ignited by a single rock spark is one Santa Ana gust from reaching the part of the site that has not yet been cleaned. To understand what is happening above Simi Valley, you have to go back to 10:45 on Monday morning, May 18th. Someone called the Simi Valley Police Department a few minutes before that. They told dispatchers they had been clearing brush with a tractor when the blade struck a rock and a spark ignited. It sounds small. It sounds almost ordinary. But that was only the beginning. Within an hour, the Ventura County Fire Department was rolling. Within 3 hours, the Santa Ana winds rotating into the foothills had carried embers across containment. By Monday evening, the first mandatory evacuation orders went out for neighborhoods on the north and west edges of Simi Valley. By Tuesday at 6 in the morning, Cal Fire reported the burn area had crossed 1,300 acres. Containment was 5%. By Tuesday morning, according to reporting from Inside Climate News, the leading edge of the fire had reached within a quarter-mile of the Santa Susana Field Laboratory. Boeing, which has owned the site since 1996, evacuated all non-fire personnel. And it gets worse. By Tuesday afternoon, evacuation orders were expanded. The number of residents told to leave climbed from 33,000 to 43,702. By Tuesday evening, the unpredictable winds threw an ember across the containment line. A spot fire ignited. Ventura County Fire deployed an additional 100 personnel, bringing the total firefighting force to 869. By Tuesday at 9:30 in the evening, the Sandy Fire had reached 1,698 acres. Containment was still 5%. By Wednesday morning, winds eased overnight. Crews used the window. Containment climbed to 15%. The Simi Valley Unified School District announced every campus would be closed. Governor Gavin Newsom briefed reporters. The Office of Emergency Services in Sacramento was coordinating mutual aid from across Southern California. 67 hours from a rock spark to the largest evacuation of the 2026 Southern California wildfire season. Zoom out, and this is where the geography starts to tighten the trap. Simi Valley is a city of about 128,000 people lying in a long east-west bowl on the western edge of the San Fernando Valley in Ventura County, California. North of the city is the Santa Susana Mountains Range, a low but rugged set of chaparral-covered ridges that connect the inland transverse ranges to the Pacific coast. The fire started on the north side of the bowl in the brush above Sandy Avenue. The wind drove it northeast and uphill toward the spine of the Santa Susana Ridge. On the other side of that ridge, about 12 miles west of Chatsworth in the open hills above Bell Canyon, sits a former federal research site covering 2,850 acres that almost nobody who lives in Greater Los Angeles has ever heard of. This site is the Santa Susana Field Laboratory. And this is the part of the story that the Wire reports almost never get into. This is the part the headlines do not unpack. This is where the visible flames meet the buried past. Between 1948 and 2006, the Santa Susana Field Laboratory was the most important rocket engine and nuclear research site on the United States West Coast. NASA's lunar landing engines were tested here. The Department of Defense tested missile components here. And in the 1950s, the Atomic Energy Commission, the predecessor of today's Nuclear Regulatory Commission, operated a series of experimental nuclear reactors on the site, run by the company then known as Atomics International. One of those reactors was called the sodium reactor experiment. It used liquid sodium metal as a coolant, an experimental design considered at the time a promising path for commercial nuclear power. In July of 1959, the sodium reactor experiment suffered a blockage of coolant in some of its fuel channels. 13 of its 43 fuel assemblies partially melted. Fission products were released into the primary cooling system and into the rooms of the facility. The exact quantity of radioactive material that ultimately escaped to the environment has been debated for 67 years. The fact that the reactor suffered a partial core meltdown has not. It is the first commercial power experiment core meltdown in world history. It occurred almost 20 years before 3 Mile Island, and it was not on the public record at the time. The incident was not disclosed to the public until 1979, when researchers at UCLA reviewing partially declassified Atomic Energy Commission files first surfaced what had happened on that mesa above Simi Valley. Now layer onto that the 30,000 rocket engine tests conducted across the same site between 1948 and 2006, because the real danger was never limited to one reactor accident alone. Each engine test required cleaning chemicals, primarily trichloroethylene, TCE, an industrial solvent that today is recognized by the United States Environmental Protection Agency as a Class C human carcinogen. The TCE went onto the soil. It went into the groundwater. It is still in the groundwater under the site today. The State of California Department of Toxic Substances Control, the DTSC, has been negotiating with Boeing, NASA, and the Department of Energy over how to clean up this site since 2007. As of 2024, only one section of the site has had its most contaminated soil removed, about 6,000 cubic yards. Boeing has stated that final soil and groundwater cleanup is slated to begin in 2026. The Sandy Fire is burning in 2026. And right now, that is the collision point between a long-delayed cleanup and a fast-moving wildfire. And here is what almost nobody is putting on the news, the precedent that makes this moment harder to dismiss. In November of 2018, the Woolsey Fire, at the time the most destructive wildfire in Los Angeles County history, started directly on the Santa Susana Field Laboratory site. It burned 80% of the property. After it was finally extinguished, the Department of Toxic Substances Control was tasked with monitoring whether the fire had spread site contaminants off the property. The DTSC's final summary report concluded that the Woolsey Fire was capable of mobilizing site contaminants. Subsequent independent academic studies, including peer-reviewed research published in the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health, found measurable elevations of radionuclides in surface dust at downwind sites after the burn. This is the pattern. A fire approaches the contaminated mesa. Some level of contamination is mobilized into the smoke column. Where the smoke goes is determined by the wind. This week, the Sandy Fire reached within a quarter mile of the same property. Boeing has evacuated all non-fire personnel. CAL FIRE has positioned engines along the property line. The wind has for the moment eased, but the mesa is still up there and the wind is forecast to return. That is what makes this feel unfinished, unstable, suspended. At this moment, the danger is not only where the flames are. It is where the smoke could go next, what it could carry, and how quickly a temporary weather break could disappear. The impacts begin at the fire line and then spread outward in widening circles. At the local level, 43,702 residents of Simi Valley are under mandatory evacuation orders. 399 more are under warnings. One home has been confirmed destroyed. Evacuation centers are open at multiple community sites coordinated by the American Red Cross. At the community level, the Simi Valley Unified School District has closed every campus for Wednesday, affecting tens of thousands of students. Local businesses across North and West Simi Valley have shuttered. Stores have reportedly sold out of N95 masks, bottled water, and pet carriers. The Ventura County 911 system has been routing non-emergency calls to outside dispatch centers to maintain bandwidth for fire-related calls, and the scale keeps widening. At the regional level, the South Coast Air Quality Management District has issued health advisories for downwind communities, including Thousand Oaks, Calabasas, and the western San Fernando Valley. The fire smoke plume has been visible on satellite imagery as far south as downtown Los Angeles. At the institutional level, Governor Gavin Newsom has activated the California Office of Emergency Services. CAL FIRE has unified command with Ventura County Fire. Mutual aid engines from across Southern California are rotating through. Boeing has positioned its own private fire response on the SSFL site in coordination with Ventura County Fire. At the existential level, the Sandy Fire is being treated by California environmental groups, including Physicians for Social Responsibility Los Angeles, which has been a lead organization on the Santa Susana cleanup fight for 2 decades, as a stress test. Their argument is straightforward, and it lands with force right now because there is no distance left between the theory and the flames. If the cleanup that was supposed to start in 2026 had started in 2007, when the state first ordered it, the contamination question would not be on the table this week. Engineering fixes the cracks. Political will is what decides whether the cracks get fixed before the next fire. And this is where it changes from a wildfire story into something larger, because what is burning here is not just brush. It is delay. It is neglect. It is the accumulated cost of waiting. For now, the winds have eased. Crews are using the window to harden containment lines on the north flank, the side facing the Santa Susana Field Laboratory. The Ventura County Fire Department has stated its operational goal is to get containment past 50% before the next Santa Ana cycle. The next Santa Ana cycle is in the forecast. The National Weather Service Los Angeles/Oxnard office has projected offshore flow returning Thursday into Friday. Red flag warnings may be reinstated. Officials are warning, in effect, that the brief calm is not the end of the threat. It may only be the pause before the next push. The Department of Toxic Substances Control has historically deployed environmental monitoring teams during major Ventura County wildfires near the Santa Susana Field Laboratory. The data from that deployment will be the key 72-hour answer. If contaminants were lofted out of the Santa Susana Field Laboratory canyons during this fire, the air monitors will know. The question is whether the public will see those numbers in time to do anything about them. That uncertainty is not reassuring. It is part of the tension, because what happens next may depend on data the public does not yet have, while the smoke is already moving. So 3 questions hang over Simi Valley tonight. Whether the 15% of containment that crews have built can hold against the next offshore wind cycle. Whether contamination from a partial meltdown that happened 67 years ago is right now in the smoke plume drifting over 44,000 evacuated homes. And whether a fire that started from a tractor striking a rock will be remembered as the year the cleanup that should have happened in 2007 finally did, or as the year the cleanup ran out of time. Right now in the canyons above Simi Valley, embers are still landing. Air monitors at the perimeter of the Santa Susana Field Laboratory are still recording. And the next round of Santa Ana wind is in the forecast for Thursday.